Well, Britain's economy is stagnating and the private sector is shrinking, all following the autumn budget.
Who'd have thought? That's according to new data released by economists who warn that tax rises are damaging confidence.
Well, yesterday, the pound dropped to its lowest level against the dollar since May.
But despite this, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has reiterated her claim that the budget provides stable foundations for growth.
Let's talk to the former chair of the Lib Dems, Mark Oaten. Mark, good to see you this morning. Rachel Reeves, in response to these latest figures, has said, I'm not content with the state of the economy I inherited. That is why growth is this government's #1 priority.
Well, it's not going very well, is it? And I think a lot of people had some sympathy that the Labour government were inheriting a difficult economic situation. But instead of fixing it, they seem to be making it even worse. And wherever you look at all of the various indicators, whether it is on inflation, that's starting to go up again, whether it's on what's happening to the pound, which is getting negative, the stock exchange is stagnant. And now you've got this alarming warning from businesses saying that because they're taking on the national insurance requirement, it means that actually they're going to pass on those costs to consumers. All round, this is looking pretty shambolic.
Can they not see what's going on? I mean, you know, it was only a couple of weeks ago, Rachel was saying, my budget will match the greatest economic moments in Labour history. The only person that appears to think that is her.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted a budget which was full of optimism, one which said, look, we've had difficult times, we're going to move ahead. And in fact, what we've got is one which seems to be suggesting more stagnation. And I think what's most concerning is that they don't seem to have a grip on a sensible economic policy. Whether you like Thatcherism or Blairism or whatever you call it, they seem to have some kind of economic vision, some plan. This strikes me as, if you like, a poor man's version of that awful Liz Truss budget, ill thought out and not put together and not looking at the consequences. You make a statement about, for example, national insurance, but it's breathtaking they hadn't realised the consequences that would have on businesses in terms of employment in the future and costs going up.
Which brings in the two key areas, doesn't it? Pensioners, of course. I mean, and all the decisions made around winter fuel allowance at a time when the price cap's gone up and people are really struggling. But also which saves, not a huge amount of money. And then the farmers' issue, national protests, which is only going to raise 200 million quid, or so, which is obviously a drop in the ocean.
And I think that I just talked about sort of economic naivety, and these two suggest political naivety, because you go into a general election, you don't say a word about these issues, and then a few weeks afterwards you spring such a shock on pensioners, and we're going to see, aren't we, energy prices going up in January, so the feeling of losing that allowance for pensioners is going to be even greater. And then when you hold 100 rural seats, you suddenly offend farmers in the way that they've done. Now, they may be right that it's not that many farmers affected, but the consequences are it sends a message that you don't get rural communities, that you don't get agriculture. So these are two huge own goals on top of what we seem to have is a chancellor who's frankly losing her grip on the economy.
Mark, you mentioned Liz Truss earlier. I mean, Liz Truss infamously didn't do any impact assessment of her budget or even warn people what she was going to do. Rachel Reeves seems to be going down that same path and making the same mistakes. And we know the fact that, the pensioners, if they all applied for pension support, any money the government make from it will be wiped out. And likewise, farmers, the money the government hoped to make from that would fund the NHS for one day. It's all alienating people, making people's lives very miserable and very hard for nothing.
And so many of these issues, one would have thought that if you lay in the bath for a couple of hours and thought it through logically with a bit of common sense, you could find a simple solution to this. If they really wanted to do something around the winter fuel allowance, we'll set the threshold at a different level so that very, very few pensioners are affected. if you really did want to tackle something around the farming, putting some protections in place so that farmers could pass on at least for 1 or 2 generations. There are simple fixes to these problems, and it's breathtaking as an outsider looking in. I'm not an economic specialist. I may have a bit of wisdom about politics, but I could see how I could fix these. And I think a lot of people are beginning to feel that this Starmer-led government just lacks the experience. We saw John Prescott die this week. I think back to some of the big beasts that we had in politics, the Jack Straws, the Tony Blairs, the John Prescotts, the Gordon Browns. These were substantial figures in the Labour Party. I don't see the current bunch having the same gravitas.
I mean, I'm not an economic expert either, and I couldn't come up with solutions while lying in the bath on this one. But what I could do, is look at what was happening and say, well, this isn't going to help growth, which Rachel Reeves, as she says, is her #1 priority. I mean, these official forecasts now suggesting that the tax rises will stymie economic growth over the next 5 years for the term of this government. I mean, it's more than obvious. So why just on the very basis of common sense aren't they getting that?
Well, I think they got themselves into a tricky situation over this commitment not to put taxes up. And so they thought, here's a clever idea. We won't put taxes up on individuals. We'll put it up so that businesses, small and large, have to pay for those taxes. That got them out of this manifesto pledge. But it's got them into a huge mess because, as you rightly say, Stephen, it's going to affect the growth. And what's probably coming down the track with some unemployment as well, because a lot of businesses are going to think twice before they take somebody on, knowing that they've got this national insurance burden.
OK. Mark, good to see you. We'll talk to you a little bit later on. Thank you. I scratched my head over it all because some of it just does seem common sense, and you just can't quite understand. I can't understand what their thought processes are. I sort of hope and pray that there is some plan in place and think, oh, actually, in 18 months it'll all turn round. But I can't see how.
Well, you think, all right, OK, let's get all the bad stuff out of the way first, and in 18 months' time, it will be better, and we'll get through the pain. But I mean, if you read this report today, and it's the front page of the Daily Mail today, it's not going to happen. There is no confidence.
No.
Businesses are saying there isn't going to be any growth. And what was the other thing they promised? Transparency. We don't appear to have had transparency either. This isn't even a political point, Stephen. It's like, I think we were all optimistic. We all wanted something to be different to come in. And instead, I just feel like every sector, farmers, old people, even young people with the university tuition fees, are being given a kicking.
Yeah.
It's like, what are they doing?
And then and then the way pensioners are getting it at the moment, which is, I mean, it's like you don't go for a group who are economically poor, sort of vulnerable, if you want to use that type of language, vulnerable, but also people who have worked and served the country all their lives and are now wanting to retire, and you go after them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's like the very last group you should go after, isn't it?
Well, they're not going to go on strike, are they?
Well, no.
Funny enough, there isn't a union for pensioners who are donating to the Labour Party. They're not going to call me cynical, but we want to know your stories. Are you a pensioner? Are you going to be suffering with the energy price cap going up, with the cold weather? Are you worried about how you're going to get through the winter? Please let us know your stories at gbnews.com/your say, because this programme is all about you, and we are very, very keen to make your voices heard.
I tell you what strikes me about the energy price cap going up in January is that it's very little difference. It's just over £21 over a year that it's going up, which for most people in normal times you'd go, well, that doesn't matter. But actually for some people it's so bad that for some people that is now another kick in the teeth.
If you're struggling on the basic pension and you're just above being able to, we had some stories earlier on, some people are at 13, 14p above being able to claim pension credit, and that's what, £11,300, £400 a year. That £21 a lot of money.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, isn't it?
People are terrified to put their heating on already, and we're not even in December.
It's an awful situation. You say, as John said, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you this morning.